Wait for just 1 second for some few more folks to jump on here. I'd like to welcome you all to the one-on-one live with Coach Blu and Athletic Director Marissa.
Hello.
It's good to have you guys all here. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thanks so much for being part of the Addict to Athlete family. We so appreciate when you guys reach out. And whatever platform you're listening to this on, the podcast version, we'd love for you to jump on there and get a review. It's awesome to help maybe push this podcast out a little further, but also get some communication going between you, the listener, and us hosts. So it's great to interact with the show. I'd love to have it there. So any platform you listen to typically has a place where you can go on there and review it. We'd really appreciate that.
Yes, sir.
As always, please stay tuned to the social media content that we have. And we've been getting an interesting little dose of reality that, do you believe this or not, lots of people are not on social media. Bless their hearts. That's incredible.
A lot of people are not on Facebook.
Yeah, so we're flirting with some ideas on how to expand some reach to those who really have drawn the line with social media, something that I think I probably should do more often, right?
Yeah.
And so, stay tuned to like maybe some applications we can maybe make for the phone, things that might help keep you guys in the loop on what's happening. And really, I guess just, we don't want to leave you out. We don't want anyone sitting on the bench. So, if you have ideas of ways that you'd like to be communicated with, please submit them to us. Blue at addicttoathlete.org or Marissa at addicttoathlete.org.
Yes, sir.
And while you're there on the interwebs, check out the website, addicttoathlete.org. You'll find all kinds of content, a backlog podcast, information, blogs, team store, and registration for 2 events coming up this summer. Please. First off, we have on June 17th, we have our No One Left Behind Team Half Marathon. This is a great experience.
What does that mean?
The Team Half Marathon, as Coach Jensen said last night, is an event where you pick a couple of your best buddies and you two run this marathon, marathon together, this half marathon together. You can only be about 15 feet apart because we want you to start together, to journey together, and to finish together. Yeah. So I like saying that you're only as fast as your slowest runner. You're also going to be able to have some interesting experiences along that way. And what I mean by that is in recovery, we find ourselves sometimes feeling out there alone. And when you gather that support system and that team, it's amazing what can happen. It'll also push you a little bit. If your team believes in you and you're maybe the one that's a little bit like apprehensive, having that team unity to kind of help motivate and push is a great, I think, experience. So this is your first half marathon. It's a great one because you're not out there alone.
Absolutely.
So you can jump on addicttoathlete.org under our races tab, and you can see that there's open for registration along with our September 5K, the Proxy Run.
Yes.
This is a brilliant run that I love. The feeling that accompanies it. It's a healing run where you run proxy for someone who's either lost their battle to addiction or mental health or are currently struggling. And you want to, kind of bring maybe just some awareness and some love and some compassion to that part of your life.
Yeah. You
can register on addicttoathlete.org. It's coming up September. We love it when we have lots of family members come out. And I love hearing the stories of the people that you're running for. So as we approach this and as we start getting these packets ready, we'd love for you to start submitting who you're running for. These people are not to be forgotten, and I want to help share that memory to keep them alive through your interactions. So again, addicttoathlete.org, you'll find all of that content on there.
Absolutely.
Marissa, as always, it's good to have a little bit of a gratitude session for our Patreon subscribers. It's you Patreon folks that help keep this podcast afloat, to help push us out there a little bit further. And I love the Patreon program because we give you something back for what you invest. So that being said, who are our amazing folks that just support us through the Patreon program?
So our Patreons, we want to thank our champion level, Shad and Freya Robinson, Ron and Dee Loesch, and Andrew Baird.
Thank you.
Our pro level, Gary Thurston. Our rookies, Sherry Polson, Earl Dyer, Wendell Wood, and Brad Waldron. And our super fans, Karen Hardy, Steve Riggs, Tracy Whitby, Jerem living in Brazil Thurston, Tara Butson, Holly Davies, Scott Foster, Brett Frew, Chris Williams, Sensei KP Brown, Patrick Forsyth, Brock Ellerman, and Christy Case.
Thank you all so much. Patreon, we couldn't do this without you. On patreon.com/addictathlete, find a tier that works for you. And we'll give you the content that is exclusively yours. There's been a lot of content being dropped recently. And
good bonus episodes.
Yeah. And I appreciate when folks on the Patreon kind of interact through there and give us feedback. I guess, as I do the Patreon content, I'm always worried. I'm like, is this even making sense? So when I get feedback that's like, hey, that was a really good episode, I appreciate appreciate it. The one that we're getting some kudos for just recently was that on being mindful and the mindfulness podcast. So go check that out if you're on Patreon, or if you'd like to join, as little as $12 can get you signed up for all of our basic content, all of our basic content. It's all there for your listening pleasure. But anyway, athletes, we got lots of stuff to talk about today. We got some interesting questions that have come through. A little bit last night with the meeting that we had, I got some conversations going last night about unpacking your emotional baggage.
It was a great conversation.
Very intense. So if you haven't seen that or heard about that, it is now an archived live video on our Facebook page. Go check it out. It's an emotional one, because we all go through life, and believe it or not, we take some hits, right?
Yeah.
These sucker punches from emotions and from abuse and from just situational things. And without the proper ability to unpack it as it comes on board, we carry that stuff unnecessarily for many years. And it's funny, whenever we go on trips, I'm typically the one that does not unpack for like weeks. In fact, I just found a shirt that I was looking for the other day in one of my bags. I'm like, oh, so that's where this is. Way Marissa, as we talk about this kind of stuff, why is it so important to avoid, carrying the unnecessary emotions through life, when really there's not a lot we can do to change it? How do we unpack it?
Well, if you keep carrying it, it just becomes heavy. And why carry extra weight when you don't need to? And that's emotional weight, spiritual, whatever it is that's just extra that you don't need, work through it and you're going to feel better. I promise.
It takes a lot of mental strength, and mental strength is kind of determined by how firmly you can direct your attention, maintain your concentration, uphold your mental energy, so to speak. And when you direct all your energy towards your goals, your mental strength is utilized properly.
Yeah.
This is a hard thing for folks early in recovery. Sometimes it takes mental strength to even get out of bed. It takes mental strength to be able to unpack the baggage. It takes mental strength to be a mom or a dad. I don't think we give ourselves credit for some of those victories because we think it's just part of our routine. I'm always blown away at people's mental fortitude and mental strength when they're approaching something super difficult.
Yeah.
I mean, there have been times that you've noticed that, man, I just don't have the capacity or the strength for this, but you've got to do it anyway because it has to get done.
Yeah. Somebody has to do it. And there's so many times it's me, so I got to do it or no one else will. So
I love it. A couple of weeks ago, we were speaking at a treatment program, and I had an individual that's been a part of Addict Athlete for quite a while. And he came up and he approached, and he was talking specifically about a situation that happened early on in the team's creation. And he was running a relay race with some of the other athletes out in Eastern Utah.
Yeah.
And there was a part of it by which either you could run the circumference of this lagoon, this big body of water, which was about 1.5 miles, or you could swim across it, which was, a little less than half that.
Yeah.
And so he's like, well, hey, I was in the Navy, I can do this. And he's like, I'm in there. Now, the thing that he didn't anticipate was that the temperature out there in Eastern Utah in the middle of summer was very hot. And as soon as he hit that cold water, his body began to cramp. But he thought, I can push through this. I've been in the Navy. I got this. And he started swimming. And about halfway in the middle there, it started to really get hard, and so much so that he began to cramp up and he was losing like motion. And he remembered like there was this gal on a paddleboard, and she couldn't have been too far from him. But when she threw him the life ring there, it was about 12 inches too short, and he could see himself cashing in his chips, so to speak.
Yeah.
And he started to go under. And I asked him, where did it come from? Where did that mental strength that you held come from? Because somehow he overpowered that doubt, that thought of this is the end, and pushed himself to the surface, did a stroke and grabbed it. They pulled him in, thank heavens, and the race continued.
Yeah.
But it scared him. And we talked about this overconfidence, this feeling of biting off more than you can chew, but more so the mental strength that it took to not give up. And when you use that in everyday scenarios and situations, this mental strength of refusing the drink, refusing the substance, refusing the temptation to jump onto the internet pornography. When you use mental straightness, that muscle gets stronger.
Yeah.
But if you don't realize that you have it, it'll atrophy.
Yeah. I mean, it's just like lifting weights, right? The way you get stronger and bigger is through that resistance. You don't get better because there's no resistance. It's the resistance that makes us stronger. And as you continue to do it over and over, you get better and you get better and you build up that strength.
And I like that. The resistance, pretty much everything you do in recovery is resistance. Think about it. Like, everything we do has some kind of resistance to it. And I love this. It's the old Buddhist philosophy talks about it is your resistance to the what is that causes your suffering. So if your resistance to the what is causes your suffering, how much mental strength do you need to not just identify it, but to engage in it?
Yeah.
So what does that mean in layman's terms, right? So it would be my resistance to, eating well that keeps me unfit and sick, right? It's because, that stuff tastes like garbage. It tastes like cardboard. There's no joy in it. All this kind of stuff, right?
Fighting it. Yeah.
Fighting it. But my resistance to it is causing suffering. And it's funny because you're like, but maybe it won't. Maybe this Snickers bar or this ding dong or this donut hole won't cause it. But it does.
Yeah.
So why, when we get resistant to something so profoundly, does it create such suffering? Like, why?
Because instead of just doing it, you're prolonging the problem. And whatever it is that you're fighting against, you're just pushing it out further and further away. It doesn't mean it moves it. It doesn't mean it solves it or fixes it or gets it out of the way. It just pushes it down the road a little, and then you run up on
you
it,
approach it,
trip on it again. It doesn't get it out of the path.
Think about it this way. It is your resistance towards your sobriety that's causing your suffering. Meaning, like, it's my resistance to walk away from the substance that's causing my issues. It's my resistance towards communicating with my biological father, my biological mother about pains and situations that happened to me in the past that's causing my suffering. I mean, we could go down the line. Is it my resistance to communicating with my wife or husband about the things in this marriage that we're struggling with that's causing this distancing?
Yeah.
It's crazy how when you look at it, it makes perfect sense. But yet we justify it in our brain as if I avoid it and don't touch it. Maybe it's not true.
Yeah. And it's often because it's so emotionally trying. It's so scary. It's so, that I'd just rather not deal with it than try to face it. But oftentimes when we do that and we continue to just kick the can down the road, it ends up becoming bigger. Maybe that can gets filled with other rocks, and every time we kick it, we're stubbing our toe, and it just gets worse and worse rather than trying to deal with it, even though it's scary and hard.
So, some of the premise I wanted to touch base on today, and it's leading right into it, is this concept of conflict resolution as well. And being able to resolve conflict means that you're no longer resistant to the issue and that you're willing to kind of put your neck out there to solve a problem at hand. And all of you out there listening to this, I know you have this. Like, I know you guys have conflict. And to resolve it means that there's going to have to be some dialogue. There's going to have to be some understanding on where it's coming from. And there's going to be some uncomfortable type, experiences that will make or break your path, right? I mean, it'll make or break the conversation.
Oh, yeah.
Why are we so resistant to, engaging in conflict resolution then?
I think sometimes it's because people don't understand what to do, how to do it, and believe maybe bringing it up will make things worse. There's also a fear of, in relationships, if I bring this issue up, is that going to end this relationship? And that's scary, so I think there's a whole lot of side things that come with it besides the emotional stuff and the fear of doing it. But
yeah,
most people don't do it. I don't think conflict resolution is taught. It's not taught in schools. It's not really taught in anything. And
right.
And I don't think we see it a lot happening on TV or even with other relationships we've seen as we grow up, watching our parents resolve conflict. A lot of times if parents get in a fight, they either, figure it out
100%
behind closed doors and kids maybe look at it as, oh, they just quit dealing with it. They quit talking about it. So it's just over, rather than how do you work through it? So yeah, people don't know how to do it.
We've heard of those family systems that say things like, well, my parents never fought in front of us,
Yeah.
And everything seemed well. But like when we all moved into the house, they got divorced.
Yeah.
It's like, oh no, they argued 100%.
There's no way that they wouldn't.
Why didn't you guys ever see it? Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's much more the old school kind of relationships. But here's the deal. If you argue in front of your children, or you have these issues in front of people that you care about, it is wickedly important for you to also resolve it in front of them too, so they can see it. Never had this growing up. Every time my parents got in an argument, it meant us packing up and moving out. And so I just didn't think there was resolution to be had. I thought it was always a one-sided thing.
Yeah.
But conflict resolution is a way for two or more people to find a peaceful solution in a disagreement. Right?
Yeah.
And that's not always easy in this I want to get mine, I'm right, you're wrong society that we live in now. There's not a lot of ability for people to resolve conflict when we're not willing to learn or see the other person's perspective.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And I know that that's kind of a hard one to swallow. But that means that we've got to get real. Yeah. And instead of attacking the other person for their beliefs, their thoughts, their experiences, we truly allow them to speak their point of view.
Yeah.
When you go in with an agenda though, and like, again, you want to be right no matter what, and even if and because, then you'll never be able to find that ability to find peace.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh yeah.
So, when you look at a situation like, again, it's your resistance to what is it's causing your suffering. And if you don't want to ruffle the feathers by bringing a situation or issue up, maybe it's, hey, I've noticed you've been, this is a classic one. This happens a lot. I noticed that I've been finding, empty bottles hidden behind bookshelves or, in vents.
It's like you're drinking
in the cupboards. Are you drinking again? Oh, no.
Those aren't mine. Those are from years ago.
Those are from years ago.
You just barely found them.
Yeah. And, it's like, okay, well, I'm not dumb because I check there often because I, have stuff in that drawer or whatever, and they weren't there last week. How hard is it then to sit down and confront and say, we've got some issues here. Like, I'm worried, I'm concerned, right? It is all about the approach. Last night was I came home from work and daughter had a little bit of a tiff, with some stuff going on. And it was funny because although you were being very open and genuine and concerned, she was like flipping out on you.
She took it as...
And you were still speaking the same language. It was the funniest thing. Yeah. I'm like, I'm not even going to intervene in this because you both were right.
She
Does
was
that make
so
sense?
Emotional about it.
Yeah.
That I just tried to be calm and just listen.
But your calmness pissed her off.
And my calmness, freaked her out, that she wanted me to get as passionate and as angry about the situation as her. And in the past, I've learned that when I get as passionate about it as her, then she just escalates and I escalate and it just gets worse. But then when I sit there and I'm trying to be calm and listen, she got furious. She was like screaming at me that I don't understand, that I wasn't listening, that I wasn't supportive. Like, I can't win.
Yeah, it was like, well, and I just sat there looking for the bottle of Vicks Rub that someone lost the lid for. I'm like, I'm not even going to get involved in this. But it was interesting because when she left, we both looked at each other and kind of chuckled. And it's like, well, at least she knows she was heard, right?
Yeah.
And the funny thing about that too is like when we get in those situations, we don't realize that like we want to be right no matter what. We don't realize that what we're seeing is maybe more often than not, they're on the same page. No one wants conflict in a relationship.
Yeah.
And so, listeners, I guess when we start looking at these kind of things, when you see an issue like this, it's, again, get down to the basics. What are they resisting that's causing the suffering?
Mm-hmm.
And so you could point out the obvious, the drinking, the hiding of the bottles. Okay, but that's a method to end, their the emotion of it.
Yeah.
What's behind all that stuff? Yeah. What's really going on?
What's the real issue?
I'm terrified of dealing with my past, and it's on the surface here, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to handle it or not, right?
Yeah.
And so when we look at that kind of stuff, I really get the feeling that like people get so nervous that they fall into those old behaviors or those old issues, and they don't realize that like conflict resolution comes by being open and honest, right?
Well, and I think it's important to remember, how do you have safe boundaries so that you can have an emotionally safe place to resolve conflict? Because if you're in a situation where your past and your relationship has been, you bring an issue up and then you're yelled at, you're, called names, it gets aggressive and to the point that maybe there's a physical altercation, then yeah, that's going to have you retreat and be like, I can't do this. I'm afraid. So you do have to be able to establish some safety there to be able to resolve conflict. Understand that's going to take sometimes a lot of work before you can even address conflict, but being able to have the thing that everyone needs to be treated with mutual respect, that we can have an argument, we can have a disagreement, we can have a conversation without calling names, without threatening, without, having these issues.
Well, and that's typically what happens too, is when there's a conflict, it usually begins with an argument, right? That's what creates the conflict. Some people that are so afraid of conflict will do anything in their power to avoid that. Me, I enjoy a good conflict now and then.
Yeah.
I like it when I post things on Facebook back in the day and people get so passionately angry. And I'm like, I'm sorry, I don't like that guy as president. There's nothing to say it's going to change my mind, right?
Yeah.
But what I found is like, why am I creating conflict? I don't mind conflict, but why creating it?
To create it, yeah.
The first thing to do in a situation like that is to embrace it. And that's a very hard thing to probably wrap your mind around, right? When dealing with conflict, you can't pretend that it doesn't exist. You can't avoid it. That tension's going to build up. And even if there's times when, you think that the energy in the room has died down, it's still resonating inside and it's going to come out at another time. So you've got to embrace it, which sounds so contrary because we want to avoid the pain of it.
Yeah.
So what would embracing the conflict look like, do you think? Like if I'm finding bottles or if I'm seeing a search history on a computer, or if I'm having these feelings that something's not right, how do you embrace that?
Just knowing that, this is going to be uncomfortable. This is going to be scary and emotional, but deep breath, like we need to talk about it. And, just like we were saying before, it's the resistance to what is. So if you cannot resist discussing it and talking about it, so just recognize it's going to be hard. That's okay. But it needs to be discussed. It needs to be talked about. We need to work through it. Well,
and, without getting into too much detail, I think, so that you listeners can kind of get a grip that although we sit here behind these mics and it makes it sound like, oh my gosh, they're the best couple. They have the best families and stuff. Man, we've got conflict quite a bit.
We have arguments.
Which is awesome because eventually it's going to make the relationship stronger. But, we've had a few conflicts with the older kids in the house. And, there was a situation where we're like, man, we haven't seen much of our oldest kid. What's going on? There was a conflict there, right? Yeah. And so it took quite a while for us to give space, to kind of ask some probing questions. And then when the disclosure came of this is what I'm feeling, this is what I'm thinking, it was kind of like, oh man, this kind of is out in left field. And it's stuff that we really, truly cannot do to change it.
It's not what we were expecting to hear either.
All we can do is support. And some of the things that she'd like to do to resolve her conflict is creating a little bit of conflict with us. But whose life is it, right? It's like, well, we could force our decision on you, but this is your life. And this is what, we'll support you in. It wasn't easy to address.
I had approached her multiple times saying, we can tell something's wrong. Will you please, what's going on? What are you struggling with? We want to help. We want to support you. And it was just, no, I'm not ready to talk about it. I'm not ready. And I wanted to push so bad.
Oh my gosh.
Just pushing. Cause it was hard. So I just had to leave it and say, all right, well, I love you. And I'm, we're here to talk when you're ready. And I did that. Oh my gosh, for weeks. And then finally out of nowhere, she just sent us both a text, which was her safer way of being able to tell us, but it came at least, but you've got to be patient with it too.
Which was interesting because it was like a day or two after the other one disclosed some conflict she was experiencing that we didn't know.
Yeah.
And it got me kind of this mindset of wow, even as we've sat here behind these mics and said all the stuff that, even our kids and the relationships that we have, are nervous about addressing conflict.
Yeah.
And it's like
talking to us. Both of them had said, they wanted to talk to us and tell us about both those issues sooner, but didn't dare. And I always thought, yeah, we have a pretty good open relationship and, they trust us, we trust them. But yeah, everyone has things that
which is
scary.
So interesting when you think about it too, because, it shows you that the emotional safety needs to be there, that the right time needs to be at hand.
Yeah.
And both of them have come out and said they just didn't know how to address these things with us.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that we said to both of them that was kind of unique is that we both apologized that they had to carry that burden for so long.
Yeah.
And I really do think that they felt that compassion there of like, dang.
Yeah.
Because again, what's the worst that we're going to do? How dare you move out of our house? Like, that's not going to happen. We're just not going to do that. But everyone gets worried about like
the response.
Yeah. If you walk in, and I remember hating this, if I walked into my job and there was a note or something that says, "Hey, the boss wants to see you."
Yeah.
I'm like, well,
what did I do?
What did I do? When damn well knew that I didn't do anything wrong, right? That I'm doing my job correctly. But like, we all have that like, ooh, this isn't going to be good. Where the flip does that come from? All of a sudden now there's this conflict and I'm trying to rack my brains on what I did wrong.
It's the survival, the, protection we all want. And our minds always default to negative and something being so bad. Because with our oldest, I had been racking my brain. What could it be? What is she going through? And once she told us what it wasn't even close to what I had guessed.
No.
Some of the things I had guessed had been way worse.
Absolutely.
And I think we do that often. But yeah, you really do have to get down to what is the real issue. And, the issue that she finally brought to us the other day, she had been bringing up other things for weeks.
Yeah.
And unbeknownst to us, that wasn't the real issue.
No.
We addressed it. We talked about it. We gave her advice when she asked for advice, but that wasn't the real issue. And it wasn't until weeks and weeks later that we were able to go. So recognize that most people aren't going to just spill everything all at once. And so creating that, emotional safety so that you can bring it up, that they can talk about it again, that I think maybe those previous weeks were her testing the waters to like see if she felt safe enough to share the other stuff.
What's interesting about that, I'm glad you bring it up, was who the disclosure came to at first. It was kind of an interesting thing, and I say disclosure, but who the conflict was revealed to first. Because I came up from whatever I was doing with the boys, and you two are already in deep conversation with the younger girl. We'll say with Savannah.
Yeah.
And she's like, sit down. And I sat down and she told him, like, wow, I'm proud of you. And I'm so amazed by your courage and all that. But then with Brooklyn, the older one, it was like, I know that she's not going to want to sit down and have that, like, she's got to move. So we jumped in the Suburban and went for a little drive, listened to some great music. And as soon as I turned the corner, she just started gushing. And I'm like, wow. It was kind of a funny thing. And I got thinking when I came back and I'm like, you turn off the TV, like, let's talk about this. I got thinking, I wonder if Marissa's upset that she's disclosing all this to me, not realizing that I'm not upset that Savannah's talking to you first. Does that make sense? And that's what it hit me of like, in relationships, you've got to be okay with how it comes. You can't feel like, oh, I'm the untrusted parent or I'm the untrusted spouse. And so no one talks to me about this stuff. It's like, no, like if you're a team, it doesn't matter how, as long as
let it go. Some of that pride or taking it personally. It's hard. Yeah. I thought that, but like, I have to be just grateful that she's willing and able to talk to anybody about it. That's even like I had told you, I'd reached out to a few other people just saying, hey, can you help reach out to our daughter? She's struggling, you know, and I can't think that I'm the only one that should or could be able to address those issues. I remember years ago, we had a friend that their kids seemed to always come to me, and, we had a good relationship. They lived right by us and always come to me and talk to me about things. And I remember the mom one time, like, attacking me and yelling at me because her daughter had come to me about some things. because I'm not her parent. I'm not her mom. And I was like, I'm sorry. I wish she came to you. I had passed the information on to mom, but she was so offended that her daughter didn't come to me that she got mad at me instead of approaching her daughter with it. But I always thought that even then thinking, you should be glad that your daughter's willing to talk to somebody. Mm-hmm. Like, we can't assume that we are going to be able to be the person that everyone approaches with every issue and problem. We just want, if we love somebody, we should be happy that they're willing to talk to somebody about it, whether it's the counselor at school, a teacher, somebody, a friend. It doesn't have to, maybe, you feel like you can't share something with a spouse, so you share it with someone else, but be glad that they can get it out.
So again, it's your resistance to what is it causes your suffering. So it's your resistance to not like seeing the value that other people have to help you with your family systems that causes this feeling of distress that you're no good, that you're a nobody, that you're nothing, that you're, and so when you look at how important that statement is, you see it. Yeah. But embracing the conflict that we're talking about and identifying the issues, okay, it doesn't just end there. Then we needed to talk together. Yeah. And we had to listen very carefully, because as one issue that was brought up was fairly like cut and dry, which is like, okay, we support you in this. I think this is what you do, and it makes more sense now. And thank you for telling us. The other one's going to be a little bit more heavy laden with some emotional work that needs to be done, and like some stuff that she's choosing to do to benefit herself that, we wouldn't certainly like promote, but I'm like, hey, if this is going to make you feel better and this is truly what you want and you're putting in all the work to do the research and stuff, go for it. Right. Yeah. And in your world, listeners, it could be like, switching like states for a job. It could be, like, do we adopt or not? It could be so many different things that you've got to be able to listen carefully, talk with it out, and then find an agreement.
And sometimes that means agree to disagree. Like you're saying, some of the issues that our one daughter wants to do to resolve, I don't agree with. But again, it's not my life. And so I'm just trying to be able to be patient and sit with it until I can come to, but I have to agree. Sometimes that agreement is agreeing to disagree and being okay to respect each other's point of view and each other's positions, even though they may not be compatible or exact.
Yeah. And the situation that she finds herself in, I really do admire her willingness to listen to counsel and to say, hey, these are things that you're choosing that aren't really like, super like tame. There's some pretty aggressive stuff that you're wanting to, to approach. But all the same breath, it's like to agree to disagree means that you're still supporting. Yeah. It doesn't mean that, like for instance, this happens quite frequently when we have, folks that are having like same-sex attraction. It's like, oh, you're attracted to the same sex? Well, goodbye. So that makes zero sense to me. Like, why in the world would that close the door on something, right? And so I think when we look at this kind of stuff, it's like, okay, these things that our family systems get involved with, whether it be, and here's the other, the opposite thing. Let's say, for instance, that your marriage has been going great, but then one partner begins to start drinking occasionally and starts, maybe not attending church as frequently, or maybe not attending family functions as much because, they're doing their own thing. They're going on vacation and they're ordering extra drinks and this. And you're like, wait a second, when did this happen? Right?
I thought you had said you were done.
Yeah.
You were going to abstain. Yeah.
Yeah. Or, like this wasn't something you did while we were dating. Why is this happening now? Right. Mm-hmm. And it's like, there are also some non-negotiables that need to take place, and embracing conflict doesn't mean that you just simply surrender either. Yeah.
You have to be able to know where you're willing to move and where you're not.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I hate to say it, but sometimes conflict resolution means the dissolving of a relationship if the other person is not willing to see their part in it, and that's a sad thing, and when I hear this kind of stuff, it really does make a gut check when we see this kind of behavior where it's like these core beliefs and values that you thought once held the relationship together really are being tossed to the side now because this is what I want. Yeah. I think we forget about sacrifice.
Yeah. I mean, if it is an issue that it's too important to drop and that you can't agree or disagree and be okay with, then yeah, you may need to look that maybe this isn't a compatible relationship long term. And where do we need to, look at something? Or do you need to change your perspective and do some research and identify if maybe you are seeing it wrong and your perspective is skewed?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so, as we go down these paths of all this kind of stuff, resolving conflict means that you provide some guidance, some direction, some feedback. You listen, again, more than maybe you talk. But the goal here is to be quick to forgive and to be quick to kind of like support. And it doesn't mean, and I love this, we used to say compromise, like you need to compromise. I don't really like that word anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Because it doesn't mean what I thought it meant. Compromising means that like something's been breached, something isn't good, but you're willing to take less than to resolve it.
Mm-hmm.
I like negotiations. I like that we're able to negotiate some kind of understanding deal, if you will, so that both parties can walk away or keep moving forward, cohesively. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But negotiations means that the conflict resolution may not happen overnight.
Oh, yeah.
It may take an abundant amount of time.
Like I say, yeah, you may need to do research and be able to look at, is my perspective wrong? And, what am I seeing that they are and I'm not? And and readdress it later. Yeah.
When you're willing to do that, the answer is pretty much ready for you to discover. But that's one of the hardest things to do, is to like see the other person's perspective. One of the hardest things, because the person who's having the conflict's not being honest. And I think when you can get down to pure, unadulterated honesty, anything can happen. Like the finding of the beer bottles or the liquor bottles. The core of that is, there's probably some real fear in changing. There's probably some real fear in attempting to do life sober and not have the distraction because of that emotional baggage that is being carried.
Yeah. But like you say, you can't force it either.
Mm-mm.
So being able to be, soft in your approach and like, where are you struggling? Why are you struggling? How can I help? Rather than, I need you to stop drinking. It's, where is the stress, or where is the struggle, and can I help support in that?
Do you think that all conflict can be resolved?
No, I don't know.
What do you mean?
I think there's sometimes, people are different. People have different views. And if it's going to mean you sacrifice your beliefs, your value system, then that's where I think maybe you need to have some separation. And that's why identifying and having some self-awareness of what your boundaries are and what you're willing to do and not do. Yeah, you've got to be able to stick to those things too, if those things are really important.
So in relationships, I know that there's these negotiable and non-negotiable rules. These are guidelines that we set. Like a negotiable rule would be, spend your weekends, or those kind of things. A non-negotiable rule would be, seeking love outside marriage or something, right? Those are non-negotiables. Do you think that we as I don't know, folks in relationships or what, do you think we really have clear defined, understanding of what in our lives are negotiable and non-negotiable? Because these things probably need to be established way early.
Yeah, not always. But I also think there's some things that we change, and we change our views or understanding of a certain scenario that maybe we would have said that's non-negotiable, to now like, no, that's not as big of a deal, And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think oftentimes people think, oh, you're a flip-flopper if you've like changed the way on your stance on certain things.
Yeah.
But I think that comes with wisdom, that comes with experience, and that is a maturity, is to be able to see things differently.
I'm so glad you said that. When people would get upset with political figures that flip-flop, that change their mind, I'm like, you idiots, that's exactly what we want. We want people to have open minds. I don't want the concrete, plant the flag, get on board or jump off. I want the people that are flexible
and understanding that things change. We've discussed many times, like years and years ago, neither of us were open to
MAT,
like MAT or harm reduction in substance abuse. And it was because that was also taught. That was kind of the culture that, no, that's that's just a easy way out. That doesn't work. And, it's just approving somebody for using and continuing to use when that's not the case at all.
And the reality is it's saving lives. Mm-hmm. And that's the same thing, right? Is even the stuff that we dealt with family and the stuff that you listeners will discover at home. If you're not willing to hear the other side and quote unquote be a flip-flopper at times, then you're going to get stagnant and you will get left behind.
Yeah.
Like Marissa said, that doesn't mean you have to like willy-nilly like agree with everything. You can definitely have your stance and draw that line in the sand. But that doesn't mean that you like surrender your morals, values, and beliefs either. But it's about hearing the other side. If we could do more of that, we'd have such an amazing society. Do you realize that?
Goodness, so much better.
I mean, come on. Like it would be, we could solve world problems right with that.
All of it.
Hearing both sides of the coin. I don't know.
And being able to educate ourselves and maybe, change our ideas and perspective with knowledge, right? Isn't that what we're supposed to do?
That's what it's about. So really, I guess what we want to kind of leave you with during this episode is to be open-minded. Don't be afraid of conflict. Listening is so important. But that means whoever's talking, make sure that you're bringing value to the table. You're not circle talking. It's one of the most mind-melting things is when someone doesn't get their point across, so they keep doubling back. It's like, my stepdad would come home and be like, who left the garage door open? I'm like, I left it open. He's like, well, if you leave the garage door open, things are going to get stolen out of there and we're going to get water damage. And if you leave it open, people will come in and steal it. And then the water might come in. And, I've told you a million times that people could come in and water damage. I'm like, do you realize you're saying the same thing for hours and hours and hours, and all you're doing is getting more mad because you don't think I'm listening?
Yeah.
Like, don't do that.
You took the wind out of his sails.
I know, when you're just sitting there like listening and he
was ready to fight and have everyone say, no, it wasn't me. And then you did. And so
it's the funniest thing when bosses do it, when parents do it, it's like, would you just knock it off? All right, I understand. It's like this. Our girls would always leave their bathroom light on. And, our house is a little bit of a hike to get up there. It's like a nice little set of stairs. And I used to lose my mind. Would you guys turn off your lights? And for some reason, it became this weird kind of like anger-inducing thing.
Yeah.
And I remember Paul Jenkins saying, well, whose problem is it? And I'm like, it's their problem. And
they shouldn't leave the lights on.
He's like, but is it? You're the only one getting mad.
Sounds like it's your problem.
And I'm like, oh my gosh, it is my problem. And I'm like,
we found a light switch for one of the lights that left on at the bottom of the stairs that you could just go switch it off.
But my thing is all right, I would rather have the relationship than have to stomp up there and yell at them and do all that kind of stuff. And I'd love to tell you listeners that they learned their lesson. They turn it off all the time.
No.
But they didn't. But you know what? If it was that important to me, I would go up there and turn it off myself.
And what did you do?
I stopped turning it off myself.
And you changed the light. Remember? To like some low energy light, so you wouldn't care as much.
Yeah, I did. I got a different wattage bulb, so it's a little more dim in there. So they have to go to the bathroom in dim light now.
Well, but then it doesn't cost as much if that was part of your issue.
Yeah.
Again, what is the real issue?
I don't even know. It wasn't that. I think it was just like all dads are supposed to say that. Like I could give a crap, but it was funny because I'm like, if it meant that much to me, I should be the one hiking up there and turning it off. Yeah. It doesn't matter to them, So it's like,
it did not.
But I really wanted them to like. It didn't matter.
To care,
yeah.
Right?
It's the same reason. Like the other day, I come walking down the basement and Cam was over there at the thermostat. And when I looked at him, he got this like look in his face. And I'm like, he said, oh, I thought you were mom. And he turned it up anyway. I'm like, I love you, buddy. That's the coolest thing ever. I'm like, do 1 more degree because it's freezing down here. But does that make sense? Like it was the funniest thing. Cause I'm like, that's life. That's how we do it. Oh, listeners, I hope you've enjoyed this little dose of conflict resolution. Please jump on the website. Keep us posted on how things are going with you. If you need any assistance or help through this little journey in navigating life, jump on attitudeathlete.org. Counseling and resources, therapy available at Blue Robinson Counseling. You can find all the links there on the social media pages. Again, jump on the website, check out our runs. We'd love to have you come out and mingle with Team Addict Athlete, rub shoulders with some amazing folks with some amazing stories. Because really what it's all about is to help you turn this mess of addiction into the mess